Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So things get worse for women who speak out in support of women's sports, for female athletes who aren't afraid to speak out, who are very vocal in defending their sport and ensuring that it stays fair. We know that April Hutchinson, it's been official now that she has been suspended for 2 years by the Canadian Powerlifting Union, simply for her comments on Piers Morgan, where she used the term trans-identifying male or biological male. Apparently that was so offensive, she deserves to receive the same punishment as somebody, on a par with somebody who dopes. Now, if you're a biological male, you're allowed to cheat all day long. But if you're a female who speaks out and says that is wrong, you're the one who's going to be punished, you're the one who's going to have things taken away from you. A sport that she has put everything into, that has helped her achieve what she has achieved today. And now that has been taken away for 2 years. Even after the 2 years, hopefully it doesn't come to that. We're hoping that she is reinstated, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that she is reinstated, because this is wrong. It's, misuse of power, if you ask me. And they're letting politics cloud their judgment. They're letting politics create bias when it is unethical to not look at these things objectively. It's actually unethical. We've got people on ethics committees picking a side and saying that they support trans athletes in women's powerlifting. And these are the people deciding to suspend a female athlete. But let's say the 2 years passes and April returns to competing under this federation. What's she going to return to? A bunch of biological males dominating, taking over the women's category? So what's the point? Even if you keep quiet and you don't speak out, what sports is going to be left for you as a woman, as a female athlete? What is it you're going to have to now deal with? What is it your daughters are going to have to deal with? The younger women who come up behind you, what are they going to deal with? You can't even have locker rooms to yourselves. So what's the point of not speaking out, if you ask me? So I commend April. She's had a few setbacks recently, but I know she's not going to stop, so take a look.
Canadian female powerlifter April Hutchinson has been suspended from the sport for 2 years for speaking out actually on this show about trans athletes competing in the sport. The Canadian Powerlifting Union used comments she made against her rival, transgender record-breaking powerlifter Anne Andres, right here on Uncensored as part of the reasoning for the suspension. Here's what she said that apparently was so awful.
So he is a 40-year-old, 6 foot, 250-pound man. Well, that national record that he broke, athletes have been chasing that for years. So it just goes to show the advantages, the physiological advantages that a male has over a female.
Well, April joins me now. Well, April, first of all, I'm appalled that you've been suspended. And I'm even more appalled that you've been suspended for stating what appears to be a simple fact. You were talking about the fact that a biological male who identifies now as a woman and is a trans athlete was getting an unfair advantage because of their physiology over you. For stating the bleeding obvious, you're the one now who can't compete.
Yeah, exactly. I guess saying truth and fact, calling Andres a biological male is considered hate speech and goes against their social media code. When talking about sports, Pierce, you would know this, you have to state what the person is. So I was actually thinking I was being polite saying a biological male, and I was, in fact, saying the truth. So bodies play sports, not identities. So when we're talking about sports, especially powerlifting, a strength sport, you need to say, call a man, call a woman a woman.
Right, because physiology, I'm afraid, is physiology. There's nothing to get away from it. It just seems completely ridiculous to me that for calling this out, this shocking unfairness towards women born with female bodies in women's sport, you can now not compete. I mean, how do you feel about this?
This was a week ago that I found out. I was sitting there on the couch. I opened the email from the ethics committee. I was blown away. 2-year suspension is very harsh. It's a suspension you would give someone that got caught for doping, put it that way. So, everyone's still shocked about it. I'm very upset. I'm very hurt by my federation. And I do feel that this suspension was issued, let alone focusing on my terminology, to deviate from the real topic at hand, which is unfairness in sports.
So as well as the suspension from the CPU, she found out this week that her display at the London Museum in Ontario has been removed. So the display was part of an exhibition that was supposed to run through till 2024, May 2024. And her portion has been removed simply because she is known as somebody who has spoken out for women's sports. She is known as a female athlete who's very vocal about having to compete against biological males and speaking about how unfair that is. Her display has nothing to do with politics, transgender athletes, nothing of that nature. Her display is purely about her sobriety. In 2019, April was told by doctors that if she didn't stop drinking, she would lose her life within a couple of years. She is someone who has struggled from addiction from a very young age, from the age of 12, after dealing with childhood trauma, such as abuse. So she turned to alcohol to overcome that childhood trauma and struggled with addiction for decades, in and out of rehab. She has been an athlete all her life, but in 2019, after getting that news, spending time in ICU, coming within an inch of her life multiple times, she decided to go back into rehab and also turned to sports, honed in all her energy into powerlifting. And that really helped her in her recovery. And this time, she was successful and has been sober ever since. Her story is an inspirational story that helps give hope, especially people who have struggled with addiction, in and out of rehab multiple times, who think that they cannot overcome their addictions. In her 40s now, an international powerlifter, sober, basically has been given a new lease of life. And powerlifting is a big part of that. But they had no fault while they're coddling biological males who want us to appease their identity, who want us to not live in reality, to accommodate them, who want us to be okay with them cheating, using their unfair advantage simply for how they were born, nothing that they achieved on their own right, but simply for how they're built as biological males, going through puberty as a man, testosterone levels, all of the advantages they have. They want us to cheer them along while they cheat, beating women by 400 pounds, for example. They want us to be okay with that. So while they're appeasing such people, they are ostracizing and excluding women, female athletes, with no fault for how that will affect them, for how that would affect their mental health. Their priority seems to be the biological male. The females will have to do how using the pronoun he is going to make the biological male feel. But they don't care about how women feel about having to share locker rooms with biological males, fully intact. They don't care how coming second and missing out on victory is going to make the female feel. They don't care about how coming fourth and missing out on getting a medal, missing out on placing is going to make the female feel. Or having a place taken away from you, where you no longer qualify because you're put one place further back by a biological male. They don't care of the impact that has on the female, on the impact that has on their mental health, on the impact it has on their experience within the sport. They don't seem to care about that. Again, their priority is the biological male. And worse still, they couldn't care less about how suspending a female athlete for 2 years is going to impact that woman. And now we have the London Museum who's going to remove a display that celebrates sobriety, that celebrates staying on the correct path, that celebrates health, renewed hope, getting your life back, celebrates all those things. But yet, because of something that has nothing to do with that, they've removed the display. Without a thought for the message that they're putting out there. That if you speak out in support of women's sports, you will be punished. You will have things taken away from you. We don't even want people to know who you are. We don't even want people to know your story. You will be removed. So speaking to Game Day London, April spoke about her story and, everything that she has overcome from a very young age till now. and the benefit powerlifting has had in her recovery. So this is what she said about her exhibit. She spoke very enthusiastically about it. She was very, honoured that she was going to be part of this exhibit. So in Resilient London, each person shares a story alongside an object to illustrate their story. Some tell of obstacles overcome and the joy found in achievement. Others share experiences with life-changing physical and mental illnesses. Still others describe the strength found in family, as well as the tragedies of personal loss. Hutchinson's portion of the exhibit celebrates her overcoming addiction and is marked by a Team Canada photo, her AA coin, and her 1-year work pin for display. The exhibit runs through May 12, 2024. It's so important to stress to people that it doesn't matter how low or how empty you feel. No matter how it seems like it's the end of the road, there's always someone there to help you. Reach out to anyone, whether it's a doctor or your friend or a priest or just a stranger. Reach out to me, she said. If I could tell myself when I was 12 years old, hey April, just hang on. Don't lose yourself and don't lose your hope. There's always a tomorrow. And that's what her display signified. It signified hope. Had nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with your opinion about, biological males and women's sports. It was simply about giving hope to people whose lives have been on the line multiple times because of addiction. People who think that it's the end of the road for them. And it was part of that exhibit with all these other stories. What simply matters are their stories. What simply matters is them encouraging others. People going through the exhibit and coming away with renewed hope, coming away with some encouragement, with some inspiration. That's it. But of course, this museum has to weigh in on the whole thing and make their stance clear. And this is what they said. It has come to our that deny their existence. Misgendering someone intentionally is a form of discrimination. Unfortunately, your comments and the public discussion around them are harmful to the 2SL GBTQI community and are not consistent with the values of our organisation, nor are they consistent with the objectives of the exhibition. As such, our team has made the very difficult decision to end your participation in the Resilient London project effective immediately. That's it. So basically, we don't like your views. We don't like your unwillingness to participate in sports with biological males. We don't like the fact that you're not okay with that. So we're going to remove you from the exhibit. We're going to remove your display. It's as if everything she's achieved in regard to her sobriety and in powerlifting, in becoming an international powerlifter, none of that matters now because we don't agree with everything you have said. But thankfully, whether she has a display at the exhibit or not, they can't take away those achievements. They can't take away from her story. And her story will continue, including the work she's doing to save women's sports, to literally save women's sports and make sure that it's still around in a few years' time, that it's still around for the younger girls coming behind her. They can't take away from that. But they do need to be held accountable because this is absolutely disgraceful. They're going to basically pick a side, not remain neutral to the situation, just focus on what the display is about. They're going to weigh in into politics. A museum, isn't it supposed to be about historical information, displaying artifacts that educate people? But yet when it comes to biology, when it comes to male and females, we're supposed to just act as if that doesn't exist. And when did she say anything about trans people not existing? When did she say anything about that? So Hutchinson told dailymail.com on Thursday she was left shocked by the museum's letter because she worked with them for over a year on the project. She said, "I am just so shocked that they would do this. I am fighting for women. I am fighting for fairness in sports. This is not anti-trans, and my exhibit had nothing to do with transgender athletes in any ideology. It's crazy to me that they would counsel me over that, because my exhibit was about my personal story with overcoming alcoholism. So the museum has since protected their tweets. They've basically gone quiet. Maybe they're feeling the backlash, as they should. And if I lived in Canada, I would not step foot in that museum, because this museum claims to be for inclusion, but they have no problem excluding women. They have no problem telling women that how you feel doesn't matter. If you're not okay with male genitalia in your locker room, if you're not okay with the unfairness of having to compete against biological males who have an unfair advantage, we will exclude you and basically punish you. That's the message that they've put out there now. So if I lived in Canada, first I thought this was in London. I was getting very concerned, but it's in London, Ontario. If I lived there, I wouldn't have stepped foot in that museum until they come to their senses. In a statement to CBC News, Museum London's head of marketing and development, Linda O'Connor, said the decision to conclude Hutchinson's participation in the project was made for reasons we have shared directly with April Hutchinson. We have no further comment on this. We take seriously our responsibility to uphold our values, promote inclusion, and ensure dignity for our team, our contributors, and our audiences. Promote inclusion while excluding a woman. Promote inclusion while excluding a female athlete because you don't agree with everything she has said. That doesn't sound very inclusive to me, and this is what these organizations do, whether it's this museum, whether it's sporting federations. They act as if they're doing something honorable because they want to include trans athletes, but yet they have no problem excluding the female athletes. There are female athletes who have self-excluded themselves because they don't want to be a part of it. They don't want to have to compete against a biological male, especially in certain sports like contact sports. The story I covered with the jiu-jitsu. We had young, teenagers having to fight grown-ass men. We had women who were tiny having to fight, men who were 200 pounds, 6 foot something. They still won because they were more skilled, but still. We had women who looked petrified. I mean, it was heartbreaking to see those images. Young girls, barely out of their teens. And some of them, there was one case where a 16-year-old would have to go on to fight a biological male. They look scared for their lives. So there are women who have walked away from their sports, excluded themselves, because they don't want to have to be forced to compete against a biological male. But these people who have weighed in on this topic, these organizations, they have shown no care for these women. We had Hannah Herensman, who retired early because she didn't want to have to compete against a biological male. One who literally shoved her off the track mid-race. But they couldn't care less about the effect that this has had on these female athletes. They couldn't care less about excluding them. They would exclude a female athlete in a heartbeat to be inclusive to a biological male. A biological male that has no business in women's sports because sports has categories. They have no leg to stand on because the categories in sports are there for a reason, and that reason doesn't magically go away because somebody takes synthetic hormones for a while or says this is my pronouns and this is how I identify. And April said the following regarding their inclusion. I'm rather happy with the CBC London article. Well balanced, so thank you. Although I would have to disagree with the museum stating that they are inclusive. The Museum of London, Ontario, Canada actually shows the opposite. They exclude women, especially women who have overcome adversities. They do not care about fairness in women's sports, and they are setting women's rights back a decade or more. Exactly. Perfectly said. And anybody who is for this is basically deciding to put biological males above that of women. Now, April has spoken about how multiple powerlifters, female powerlifters, have written to the CPU saying that they don't want to compete against biological males, talking about how unfair it is. And you know what? They were ignored. But what's worse is some of the people making these decisions are women. It doesn't make any sense. Maybe because they haven't had to compete against a biological male. They haven't had to wrestle a biological male. They haven't had to, come in second because somebody with an unfair advantage took your spot. Maybe because they haven't had to deal with that. Because I don't know what goes through their minds when they talk about inclusion and when they talk about, certain rights, while dismissing the rights of women.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Megan Rapinoe, the football player, soccer, of course, over in America, who has just retired. And right at the moment of her retirement, she said, what I'd really want is to see trans women playing in the US women's national soccer team, which is great because it means her place won't get taken. And my response would be, okay, so what happens if Lionel Messi, who's playing in the MLS in America, what happens if he decides to identify as a woman? A, he can, if he wants to. B, there'll be no law against him prohibiting him from playing for the American women's national team. Is that the way we're going to go? Where Lionel Messi suddenly says, I'm a woman, and breaks even more records, but makes it irrevocably impossible for an actual woman to compete. That is where this is going if we're not very careful, isn't it?
Oh, it's true. And you said it, Pierce. It doesn't affect Rapinoe anymore. So have fun virtual singling. That's exactly what she's doing. For my sport, it affects many lifters. I know 4 lifters off the top of my head that will be competing against Anne coming up and that have a problem with it, that have actually written the federation. 2 people have dropped out. 1 person cut weight so they don't have to compete against Anne. It's not consensual. And I mean, it only takes 1 person to not consent. And the federations that are allowing this, it's disgraceful. It is disgusting that they're allowing this to happen. Yeah,
but it's basically licensed cheating is what it is. And it's like saying that certain competitors can dope. If that was the case, everyone would be up in arms and saying, well, it's unfair because you get an advantage. This is unfair. You get an advantage.
So it's all to virtue signal. It's all to say that, how progressive I am or how progressive our organisation is. But when it comes down to it, these organisations are going to be known to be on the wrong side of history. They're going to be known for having a hand to play in the demise of women's sports. They're going to be known as the organisations who punished female athletes during this time, just for defending their sports. And as of now, these federations, these museums, businesses, whatever, they have to be held accountable. So I'll leave some links below if you want more information on April's story, her icons page, I Stand With April. If you want some information of how you can support her, she's raising money for legal funds, because this is discrimination. You can't say you're against discrimination while discriminating against females. What's happening is you're pushing your ideology, you're pushing your politics, and using that to discriminate against women. That's what's happening. So let's stand behind April, let's support her. And she has been, resilient, funny enough. She has exemplified that. I couldn't think of someone more fitting to be a part of that display. Well, let's really get behind her and support her in any way we can, whether you speak out, whether it's a tweet, whether it's a video, whatever you can do, whether you donate, in any way that you can support her, let's do that. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.